So today is Mothering Sunday, and it's traditionally a day when people returned to their home bearing gifts for their mothers, and they returned to their mother church, the place from which they'd come. And so today is a day when Christians reflect on the theme of mothering, but also on what it means to be the church. So one of the readings set for today is from John's Gospel, chapter 19, verses 25 to 27. And it takes us straight to the foot of the cross, to the final few moments before Jesus died. This is what it says. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. The first thing to notice is the intimacy of the scene. Here, unlike the other Gospels where they stand far off, the women stand so near to the cross that they're able to hear Jesus' words. This horrifying event is witnessed heartbeat by two of the closest members of Jesus' family and by the so-called beloved disciple and another unnamed woman. So Mary stands near the cross. There's nothing she can do. Her son is in pain. He is dying. Simeon prophesied that a sword would pierce her own soul, and here she felt that agony, the pain of helplessly standing by her beloved, unable to relieve the pain, unable to make it better. There is something about mothering that is not about doing, something that is just about being there. It's what we mean by the word assistance. The Latin of the word assistance is ad sisto, which means to stand with. It's a very physical word. It means putting one's body somewhere, giving one's physical presence to someone. And that's what mothers do. They give their physical presence. A mother will hold a baby in her arms, draw the baby close to herself, embrace it, smile at it. She will give her physical presence. When that baby grows up, it will return to its mother for security, to be held, to be cuddled, to know itself to be beloved. Later in life, mothers often go through it all again as they give themselves to their grandchildren, sometimes in the midst of or despite family breakup or trauma. Mothering is about the giving of oneself. It's about being physically present with someone. And sometimes that is all we can do. Sometimes you can't make it better, no matter how much you'd love to. Sometimes all you can do is be there. Like when you're visiting someone who's bereaved or depressed or chronically ill, there may be nothing that you can do, but you can stand with them. You can be with them. You can offer them assistance. A vicar once recalled a conversation that he'd had with an elderly lady who lived alone. The lady said to the vicar that actually she was being well looked after. The chiropodist came to attend to her feet. The nurse came and dressed her ulcers. Meals on Wheels brought the dinners. Home Help did the shopping and cleaned the house. The doctor checked on her occasionally. But you, she said, turning to the vicar, you come to remind me of him from whom they all come. In these days in which there is a desire to professionalize even the ministry of ordinary members of the church, we need to remember that we're not called to replicate or duplicate what is already offered by other professionals. But often we're called to give what they sometimes cannot give. We're called to give generously of our time, to give ourselves, to simply be with people, and in that being to minister something of God to them, to represent, to symbolize that divine assistance, that sense of the presence of God. But having said all that, a mother's love is also deeply practical. The women in the gospel reading showed their love for Jesus by being physically present with him. But as we learn from the gospel accounts of the time after Jesus has died, they would also gather again in order to embalm Jesus' body. There was something very practical to be done. Mothers often show their love by what they do. And it is often in their doing of the tasks that are unglamorous or routine, like washing and ironing and cleaning those areas that nobody else cleans. Even in our more egalitarian age, it must be said it's still most often the women who will do those jobs that no one else will do. And that is true in the world of work as it is in the home. And I think one of the roles of the church is to do those jobs that no one else will do. To visit those in prison, to care for those who might otherwise die alone, to minister to drug addicts and prostitutes, to tend to the homeless and the refugee. Much of the work of the church is unglamorous or routine. But day after day and week after week, the church is there. You are there. By our physical presence and by our acts of loving service, we as a church show our love for others. But that reading from John's Gospel doesn't end there, for it contains one final twist that speaks of what our love might be. The wisdom of the world says that the family comes first, that blood is thicker than water, that you look after your own. When a certain person said that there was no such thing as society, she added that there were just individuals and families, as if the responsibility of care was just to our family, and that was it. But in our reading, we hear Jesus bequeath the care of his mother not to his brother James or to his sisters, but to John, his beloved disciple. Jesus places a strong familial obligation on a man who had no blood ties with Mary or her family. And from that moment on, John was to be a son to Mary, and Mary was to be as a mother to John. A new kind of relationship was emerging, and a new kind of family was being formed. These days, families come in all shapes and sizes. Families fall out. Families reconstitute themselves. Mothers become stepmothers, fathers become stepfathers, and children face the world accompanied by an array of adults, each with a different notion of parental responsibility. Many are loved, but some are neglected, and some are just bewildered. All people, but especially the beaten and the broken and the lost, can come to the church, and they can be part of our family. For church is a place in which everyone is someone else's brother and someone else's sister. And increasingly, I think that is our fundamental part of our mission. We can be for others the family that they may simply otherwise not have. When I was in Coventry, we used to run a project that, in the small hours of a Saturday morning, offered hot drinks and a listening ear to those on their way back from the city's nightclubs. Many of those who volunteered for the project were women of what the prayer book refers to as being of riper years. And one night, a very troubled teenage girl looked up at one of these women and said, "You're just like my gran." It turned out that because her parents had gone their separate ways, she didn't see her gran anymore. But here was someone, a member of the local church, who was able to show something of that love, something of that care, something of that wisdom that circumstances had otherwise denied her. We sometimes talk of the church as if it came into being at Pentecost. But I think that there is a sense that at the foot of the cross, Jesus constituted the church by creating a new way of belonging to one another, a new way of caring for one another. And still today, especially as we slowly stagger out of lockdown, the mission of that church has something to do with being alongside others, standing by them, being there with them and for them. It has something to do with the showing of our love in the doing of those tasks that are unglamorous or routine. And it has something to do with us being a family whose love for one another is both what unites us, but also what we are then able to extend and offer to those who are not yet members of the church. That is why on this Mothering Sunday we celebrate all who live out that love and show that love in what they do. That is why we thank God for mothers, remembering especially today those mothers whom we love but see no longer. But today also we celebrate this church, this places of people and refuge and care and love that for centuries have stood alongside communities, caring in practical ways and being an open and inclusive family for all who come their way. Today, I thank God for you. Amen.